Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the Russian warlord who'd courted African nations turning away from their traditional colonial allies is reported dead. Yevgeny Prigozhin's name is on the passenger list of a plane that crashes near Moscow. Also, a chaotic day at the polls in Zimbabwe leads opposition leader Nelson Chamisa to cry foul, alleging voter suppression as he goes up against incumbent Emmerson Mnangagwa. And the BRICS club is willing to build itself up. The group of emerging economies meeting at the key summit in Johannesburg agrees to expand its numbers as it pursues greater geopolitical clout. But first, the Russian mercenary group Wagner has confirmed the death of its leader Yevgeny Prigozhin in a plane crash near Moscow. Thousands of Wagner troops operate in several countries across Africa, including Central African Republic, Libya, Sudan, and Mali. Even the recent junta in Niger may have been putting out feelers. Now, Wagner had been an unofficial extension of the Kremlin's reach, but that relationship was complicated by an uprising against Russian President Vladimir Putin in June. Now, Prigozhin is dead. Dr. Fola Aina from the security think tank, the Royal United Services, tells me more about what Prigozhin's end means for Wagner's operations in Africa.
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, I think it doesn't make so much of a difference because in many ways, Wagner has been able to establish its presence across the region, the continent. So I feel basically that what's going to happen right now is simply to get a replacement for him. And then the group's basically its operations continues basically in Africa uninterrupted.
And post-uprising, can the African influence of the Kremlin and that of Wagner still really be seen as one and the same? Is this likely to change much when it comes to Putin's interaction with Africa?
Again, so I think we shouldn't expect so much to change with regards to this interaction with Africa. First and foremost is because Russia has a very keen interest in Africa right now. And with what's been happening with the West and the region or on the continent, there's a keen need for Russia to try to fill in the policing gap, that has been created as a result of the West's declining influence across the African continent. So if at all anything, I would say that would be seeing more of an inroad by Russia across the region, and whether or not Russia will be using Wagner Group to achieve this would be much to be desired or much to be seen, basically, for Russia. But it's certain that they would definitely continue to make this inroads across the continent, and in many ways also try to assure, that their interest in Africa is guaranteed and secured.
And when it comes to Wagner itself, just give us a bit of a sense of what its footprint looks like on the continent at the moment.
So yes, Wagner has been very much entrenched in Africa, and they've been making lots of plans to try to expand this reach. So currently they have a presence in Mali, in the Central African Republic, also in Burkina Faso, and like you rightly mentioned, also there were already plans to get involved in Niger, considering the recent developments in that country. But now I think what they'll be trying to do is to go ahead with these penetration into the African continent and expand upon, some of the gains they've already made on the continent, irrespective of the fact that their leader has passed on.
Well, Dr. Fola Aina there speaking to me a little earlier on. Now, in other news, Zimbabwe's main opposition leader has accused incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government of vote rigging after huge delays at polling booths during Wednesday's high-stakes elections. Voting stations were still being opened in some places as others closed for the day. Shirley Sitbin tells us more.
These voters arrived to their polling stations hours before they were due to open, but they discovered that their ballots had not been printed. Some voters' names were also missing from the official registers.
But I'm going to sleep here. I'm not going home. Home is going to come here because I want to cast my vote. My children are suffering. No employment, no education. We cannot afford it.
Is it professional? So at the end, we as the citizens of Zimbabwe, we are not going to trust the result which is going to come out, especially if it's favoring the incumbent.
The incumbent president, 80-year-old Emmerson Mnangagwa, is facing once again Nelson Chamisa, 45, from the Citizens Coalition for Change. Chamisa said voting delays were a deliberate attempt to alter results.
It's a clear and a deliberate plot. They are targeting urban areas. They've made sure that there are no ballots for the councillors. There are no ballots for other candidates.
NGOs have accused authorities of blocking opposition rallies and campaigns. Asked if he had a message for the nation, President Mnangagwa replied,
Peace and violence.
Emmerson Mnangagwa hailed the high turnout among young voters.
Well, Nyasha Chingono is in Harare, and he tells me more about whether the chaos of the voting day could have been anticipated.
Thank you so much for having me. I think the writing was on the wall that ZEC was not ready to hold this election. Before, about 2 weeks ago, it was taken to court by the main opposition party for 3 reasons: that it had not revealed who had printed the ballot papers. Number 2, how many ballot papers had been printed, and also number 3, that were they ready to disperse these. So the writing was on the wall that the Electoral Commission was not prepared to run this election. We saw it today. Many people right now are still voting as late as 9 p.m. Voting in some police stations started as late as 7 p.m. So it's actually a worrying sight. It's the first of its kind in this country that the Electoral Commission has failed to provide the basic requirements of running a credible election.
And Nyasha, Nelson Chamisa is trying to break ZANU-PF's grip on power. Mnangagwa is trying to run for a second term. What are the overall stakes here?
For the incumbent, this election and its credibility is very important for the reason that Zimbabwe is owing nearly 18 billion to the multilateral institutions. And as part of the conditions that for debt resolution to take place, Zimbabwe is supposed to hold a free, fair and credible election. So he cannot afford to let this slip through his hands. He has to make sure that this election is run fairly. And also, this is his second and last term. He needs to get this vote so that he can also instill confidence in the people that put him into power back in 2017. For Nelson Chamisa, it's a do or die for him. If he does not win this election, it means that another 5 years of Zimbabwe under ZANU-PF rule, which will extend it to about 48 years in power. So it's something that is the ball is in the two men's court that they need to make sure that they win this election for the generality of Zimbabwe, so that life can change for the poor person on the street.
Nyasha Chingono there for us in Harare. Now, leaders of the group of emerging economies known as BRICS, made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, have agreed to expand their membership. Calls to enlarge the BRICS have dominated conversations at a summit in Johannesburg. Some of its members would like to boost its weight as a geopolitical counterbalance to the West. Erin Bates with more.
AU Chairperson Azali Assoumani, as well as UN Secretary General António Guterres, are among delegates at the 15th BRICS summit held here in Johannesburg, South Africa, on the African continent for the first time. Of course, Assoumani's presence is important because of the appetite amongst African countries, among them Zimbabwe. We've also heard reports about Algeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo to join the BRICS bloc. Of course, Guterres' press conference, which is set to take place after 2 two meetings he's been invited to attend on Thursday, the 24th of August, will be important because there's been so much discussion about putting a balance to the prevailing world order. In fact, during the addresses from the five heads of state on Wednesday afternoon, we heard commentary on the need for bodies like the UN Security Council to have stronger African representation and indeed permanent representation. You could say that the sirens have been sounding from delegates here at the 15th BRICS summit in terms of expanding membership. There's consensus from leaders on that score. The question now is what will be the criterion and indeed the impact of growing the group.
Erin Bates there for us in Johannesburg. That is, though, where we'll have to leave it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do stay with us, though. More coming up. Take care.